people will lose our ability to see that we're all one people in the most fundamental of ways, and we'll lose track of the deep truth expressed by the old Solzhenitsyn line that I return to time and time again, that the line between
the United States has not changed. With all the talk and all the nonsense about renewables and the new lifestyle and all this, it's great for your guilt complex, but it doesn't do anything for the total accumulation. He was put there by Rockefeller, and Brzezinski was a Pole. He got revenge from the Poland. Poland has always been attacking Russia, as far as I remember, back to another century. I mean, the two world wars that occupied Russia, and so tragically, entry points were always through Poland.
he speaks freely, and it's refreshing.
Yeah.
No matter whether you're rich or not, it doesn't matter. When you speak freely, it's a beautiful
Actually,
thing.
you must go. And a major point on going back to nuclear energy, he never believed in it at first, apparently. He was going for back. We know that Putin was not a communist. We know that Putin is very much a market man, and he made it very clear and tried to keep an open climate, a new relationship with Europe. But the United States certain people in the United States always saw that as a threat, like Putin is trying to take Europe away from us, as if we own it, as if we have the right to own it, for this new world to have balance. That's sovereignty for China, sovereignty for Russia, sovereignty for Iran, sovereignty for Venezuela, sovereignty for Cuba. This is an idea that's crucial to the new world, and I think the United States has never accepted that. Sovereignty is not an idea that they can allow. They in Russia are very much there. So when people refer to Russia as Putin, they're mistaken. And they do this regularly in the New York papers and all this. So they say Putin did this, Putin did that, Putin's doing that, but it's Russia that's doing it, and that's what. In other words, close down some of the nuclear reactors. There was talk of that, but thank God France did not do that. And Macron came in and recently reversed it, and they're building as fast as they can now, especially with the Ukraine war going on. There's an awareness that Russia may not be providing the energy Europe needs. Keeping a balance, keeping it neutral.
Yeah.
He played both sides. And because Yeltsin wanted him to join the Russian Confederation in a certain way where he'd be supporting against Gorbachev. The Snowden affair had happened, and I was working on a movie on Snowden. That happened in 2013. Ukraine happened in 2014. And one thing after another. By 2014, Putin was enemy number, again, becoming a wanted man on the American list. He was in evidence back then. It was full out. The condemnation of Russia on all fronts. I never saw a positive article about Putin. And although when I traveled in the world, and I traveled a lot doing documentaries, it was very clear in the Middle East, in Africa, in Asia, there was respect for him, that he was a man point, but he was still very much involved. But for 20 years, more or less, he's been at the administrator of the state, the protector of the state. And he's apparently done a good enough job that the Russian people have kept him there, because contrary to what many people think, proven, but which has always been repeated and repeated to the point at which it becomes like an Orwell mantra. It becomes like, he is, of course, the bad guy.
Can I just ask you, as a great filmmaker and as a human being, what was it like talking to one of the most powerful men in the world?
Respect for a country. And now, when it started to get personal with Putin, it changed, and our thinking changed in a negative way. We no longer respected it as a country. We were seeing it as a man, and the man we had trashed repeatedly. I talked to him, not interviewed him, but talked to him at length and I like him very much. And I saw the divide, as you saw in the Putin interviews, between Gorbachev and Putin early on in the interviews. You sense Putin doesn't particularly care for Gorbachev because he, in his point of view, he screwed up the administration of Russia and is responsible for so much of the disaster of leaving all those people outside the Soviet Union. Uh, in Moscow. Why don't you just sit across the table from him and try to have a discussion without falling into ideologies and stuff like that?
Can I ask you for advice? You did some of the most difficult interviews ever. Do you have advice that you can give to someone like me or anyone hoping to understand something about a human being sitting across from them about what it takes to do a good interview?
You're doing one.
Well, no, but there's levels to this game. And interviewing somebody like Vladimir Putin, also language barrier, sit across from the man, try to keep an open mind, try to also ask challenging questions, but not challenging with an agenda, but seeking to understand and understand deeply. How do you do that?
Seeking the truth. It's very simple. Seeking the truth. Being a questioner like you are, you want to know what is really going on. I could not get anywhere with Biden or Bush or, for that matter, Obama. They'd be opaque with me. There's no interview possible with the President of the United States because he's got to stand for all the stuff
that's between the lines.
I'm often struck by when I talk to scientists, and I've talked to a few, at how arrogant they can be about, they don't talk to you if you don't understand their world, and they talk to each other, and there's an arrogance, a closed circle kind of thing. Into madness. Schroeder in Germany, same thing. Of course, Putin condemned the invasion, and Putin had been an ally of the United States since 9/11, if you remember correctly.
Yes.
And had called Bush, and they were getting along. So even Putin said, "I won't go. No, don't go into Iraq. This is not the solution." The United States. Charles de Gaulle pulled France out of NATO because he saw the dangers of NATO, which is to say, you have to fight an American war. When they say, and they put nuclear weapons on your territory in England and France and Italy and Germany, when they do that, you're hitched to this superpower, and you have no say. Raised enormously by the United States contribution.
Is it possible for you to steelman, to play devil's advocate against yourself and say that Vladimir Zelensky is fighting for the sovereignty of his nation and in a way against Russia, but also against the United States? It just happens that for now, the United States is a useful.
And some of the stuff that's going on in the West. But we have a lot of Russians in Europe and America that attack Russia and sometimes don't understand that they are under pressure from the United States, and they don't understand the size of the pressure. And that's why Putin connects with the people, because he represents experience there. Newspapers. It was more interesting. Put it this way: when I went to Venezuela, the United States was saying back then that Chavez controlled the press. I get to Venezuela, and there's nothing but criticism of Chavez in the press. It was owned by the oligarchs. I met with the publisher who got the Nobel Prize of that famous newspaper, and his point of view at that time, when I spoke to him a few years ago, was, we're operating, there is criticism of him, but you can't call for the overthrow of the government, nor in Venezuela, nor in the United States.
And he calculated wrong.
Well, he also made the point that the talk of Zelensky saying nuclear weapons were going to come into Ukraine. There was talk about that right before the invasion, too. And certainly that would have set off alarms. The United States is already kind of doing that by not only putting its intelligence and its heavy defense budget is $60-some billion a year. It's nothing compared to the United States, 1/15 of it. But yet we've put so much weaponry into Ukraine. The money we've spent of America in its quest to demonize Assad and the Russians of all these chemical attacks that were happening that they were vowing came from Russia. And in spite of the fact that Russia just pulled out of signed the agreement on chemical arms and apparently destroyed its stock several years ago. What is, all these questions that come up, his sense of grievance as a result of World War I, there's justifications there, etc. But and by the way, Churchill was trying to make a deal with him in 1938. That's a fact that people don't know. It's Churchill himself. And, there was still the desire in England to make peace with Germany. And it was seen as a possible, what Churchill really wanted was Hitler to go against Russia. And he into the situation with the idea of invading Ukraine, not only Donbass, but invading all of Ukraine and getting rid of decapitating the government there, which is all assumption. We don't know what they would intend it to do.
But you, at the time, as did a lot of people, thought that all the talk of the Russian invasion of Ukraine is just propaganda. It's not going to happen. It's very unlikely to happen.
I think many of us thought that the United States is building this up into an invasion. In other words, that is the nature of false flag operations when you create